Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Hajim Zero here, back with another quick movie review. Yeah, it is raining, so hold on, let me adjust this camera. Hopefully it doesn't fall. Okay. So, this one might be a long discussion because it was a lot of things I had on my mind, even watching this movie. This one is The Birth of a Nation by Nat Turner, the remake, unlike the the Ku Klux Klan propaganda one. What I'm saying is not the Ku Klux Klan propaganda one, but it was indirectly one of the reasons why he possibly named the movie the way he did, because both pieces of the film are indirectly propaganda, but it's also a flop on perspective as well. Um, but of course, with this one, it was more about humanity than it was about the propaganda of the slave narrative. So starting from the beginning, this is the story of Nat Turner and his 48-hour slave rebellion in Virginia, I believe. I just the city had lost my mind of where it actually happened, but from Virginia and all the plantations, and it really started the whole revolt and revolution of the oppression in this country of black people, and not just the blacks, but you also have the Latinos, and then the Native American culture as well is coming up behind it, and I'm waiting for a film about that because even that hasn't been talked about. And out of anyone, how they socially today talk about reparations, the Native Americans definitely deserve it, but they're pretty much in their own little corner living their life, despite of how the Anglo-Saxons and the settlers who came to the country had raped and pillaged everything and wiped them out, with not just with physical weapons but with disease. But going back to this, and I'm possibly going to jump back into that social commentary part. uh when Nat Turner, he was pretty much a preacher on a plantation, by the family, the white family that had owned him and the other slaves. And you know um that was really the start of the whole revolting revolution, because and it was right after he had died, and even before he had died, well, most likely after, they were definitely pushing and implanting that slaves do not learn how to read and write, because that's how they would get the ideas of liberation, and knowing that they are human beings that don't don't necessarily need to be owned by anybody. And even though he was taught how to read and write from the Bible, and the Bible does talk about slavery and submitting to your master, I'm reading the Bible right now, and the Bible has many different interpretations of what slavery is. And even one of my ministers, in one of his sermons, he had talked about we're all a slave to something. It just doesn't mean the physical plane of this world. You could be a slave to God, you could be a slave to sin, you could be a slave to addiction. It's many interpretations, it's not just one. And that's what he quickly learns. In the beginning, they were, as a kid, they were telling him what to read out of certain passages, and then when they would take him around different plantations, that's when they would tell him to say certain things. And even if you watch other films like 12 Years of a Slave, and I think even a line out of Ghost of Mississippi, of how they would try to justify their actions for doing something bad. And it's like it stated, it does talk about submission to your master and being a service, really, really, more or less. And it doesn't mean being it to a man on this earth. And I'm not a real heavy religious guy, because that's going to go in the conversation of later why he had revolted, and because he saw the contradictions in what he was being told. And on top of that, you have a good little mix of the Guyanan, ancestry, that many blacks who were born into slavery in this country, that's where they came from. And my mom currently is doing a lot of ancestry stuff in our family, and that's where our roots really trace back to. But regardless, every single human being on this planet, all their roots retrace right back to Africa, you know. And this is when the whole evolution comes in, and I'm not going to go deep into it. If you learn about the hereditary system by Gregory Mendel in high school, with the white mouse and brown mouse, or no, the white mouse and black mouse, how eventually over time, the original new man will look a little bit different. And that's a whole deep conversation by itself. I might talk about it when I get into the movie Legion, but for right now, I'm kind of jumping off point to point. But make a long story short, he leads the 48-hour revolt. He is killed, and history says that he was skinned and decapitated. And just recently, the descendants had just got his skull back, and it was really just to show the nastiness of it. And even when he was skinned and flaked, it was really the horror of, destroying who he was. And the nastiness of it is that they even use his skin as like furniture. It's like some Edward Gein, nasty stuff. They dismembered his body, and it was unbelievable. And even the documentary on this DVD, they went back into the town, and it was Confederate flags and everything. How Nat Turner really isn't remembered. Of course, some people are going to say, he was an extremist for what he did, and a little bit he was, because he just didn't kill white men, he killed women and children. And even I'm skewed by that myself. But one of the black I don't think he was a teacher, but he was like a researcher who had literally said it goes both ways. Yeah, they raped and pillaged our children. And even in one of the scenes in the movie, the sexual assault happens, the pedophilia happened when right after they had killed one of the white slave owners. It was a kid in his bed, and it was just the nasty dawningness of me. And even when I posted this on Facebook, I was watching this movie. A mutual friend of mine said that he couldn't watch the movie again, and I was assuming that he couldn't stomach everything that was going on, because I've been watching slave narrative movies since I was a kid. This isn't the first slave narrative movie I've seen. The first one I remember watching was Amistad with my mom back in '97 in theaters when it came out, and it did had an odd perspective, but it was really showing the perspective of what the slaves went through going from Africa all the way to the Americas. And of course, Steven Spielberg had directed the film. This is a very good movie, and it didn't shy away with some of the content, even though it didn't go deep and heavy, because when I posted it, I didn't see the movie yet, or I think I just finished watching this morning. I watched the audio commentary. I was watching the first like 30 or 40 minutes of it last night, and I was thinking like, this dude has not watched many slave narrative movies or movies that are on this topic of just dehumanization that was real. Rosewood was another film of the same somewhat narrative, except it was in the 1920s, but just the psychology and the thought process of we can do anything, to the blacks in this town, in this county, and even put a lie on them and just kill and wipe all of them out. And even that was nasty itself. And the list goes on and on. Ghosts in Mississippi Burning. He obviously, I was assuming he hasn't watched many, but I had empathy for him, because the scene that hit me the most was when they were going around killing all the blacks, looking for Nat Turner, who was hiding out in the woods for 2 months. They were killing the children as well. So again, it really didn't make any difference, because that's what the slaves or the Anglo-Saxons and the slave owners were doing before and after this. And it's just more of, we are tired of this shit, and something's got to happen. And even when I review Straight Outta Compton, it's going to be something similar, with a little bit what they did and how they fought back and saying what they said. And this goes back to the whole dehumanization. I didn't see this more as a propaganda as, most people did, when this movie came out. It was more of how fucked up it was. And anybody, black, white, Latin, or Asian, if they're being oppressed by somebody for a long ass time, they're going to fight back too. It's only, the thing is how smart and how calculated that, you end up doing it. And it's a similar system that's in place today. It's not just the whole race factor that's being put out there for propaganda. It's pretty much, the little man who's getting their ass kicked. There's some poor white people who are in a fucked up position, or, disunfortunate people who've been dealt a bad card, and some of the higher ups who know this and they take advantage of it. And this movie had a lot of different layers to it, and it's kind of funny how they try to put controversy not just on top of who Nat Turner was, but with Nate Parker himself, with the whole, rape allegation, and then him married to a white woman. And even that whole thing was just completely stupid because, it really started when they found out he was married to a white woman, and that's when they dug into his rape accusation, and how it just got out of sporadic control. And I was like, on the social part, many people were doing this because they saw the movie the black people did. They saw it as a narrative, for open season on white people. And when they discovered that, it felt like, oh, now he's the Uncle Tom, or so-called the house nigga that's, in bed with the white woman. And to be honest, it's not true. The psychology of how they're thinking right now, that's the same psychology, a little bit of what the slaves owners had on the slaves, just a tad bit. And like I said, I could see it from the whole racial perspective point of view, but I see it from a human dehumanization point of view, because this is the same thing that indirectly happened in Egypt with Moses and the Israelites and the Egyptians. All of them had the same shade of skin, to a degree. It was just more of different culture and them saying that we are superior than you and you're going to build, our nation. And that's how it was. So, even with the Native Americans and black people, how they try to put that everything was peaceful before the white people showed up. And I was like, not really, because you had different tribes fighting each other. And it was just, the fact that the whites had came over, and then they had much more advanced weaponry and even knowledge to a degree, to mentally control them with religion. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not religious today, because it's not really about the word of God anymore. And the thing is, of how they say, what was I about to say? I lost my train of thought. Of how they really say about with people, a lot of atheists existing and whatnot. I was like, a lot of it had to do with, religious contradiction. And I don't blame God for anything that's happened on this earth. God didn't do this. We as a human species did this to each other. And it's just the demon of a seed that's been passed on ever since then. So, when it was a play that my mom and I had saw when we went to Texas, and it played a little bit on this movie about, where's your God now and all this and that and the other. And I was like, I'm tired of people really saying that, because I have my relationship with God regardless of me not being religious. I'm just tired of man damning his belief, and they're not preaching the right word. They're preaching to their, to their narrative, or to pretty much control you. The same thing with politics. So, I just kept this to myself. I haven't told my mom, and even with the doctrines today, a lot of the Christian doctrines, underneath the veil is only a few people who get along and who can converse with another person of a different religion, not just being Christianity, but just seeing the human side of it. But the sad part, that's how it contrasts with religious belief. So I had my own transitional spirit awakening, and I know it's definitely not going to change me. I can fool these people into thinking I am on their side, or thinking that I believe what they believe. But most of the time I stay to myself, because it's like I said, they put a narrative out, that best fits them. And it goes, and not just beyond the religion, like I said, the social commentary, some of our laws, some of our political beliefs. And it's just unbelievable, And like I said, it's more of a human dehumanization thing. But regardless, that's all I gotta say. Hopefully, I won't get too much flack for this movie. But see you on the next one. Peace.